All right, welcome back to the program. Economic challenges ahead of the governors, re-elected governors, and the governors-elects. My guests are with me here. I will start by introducing Dr. Franklin Ngwu, who is the Director of Public Sector Initiative at the Lagos Business School. He joins us from Lagos. And Kelvin Emmanuel is the Chief Executive Officer at Dairy Hills Limited. He's with me here in the studio. Welcome to you, gentlemen. Welcome, Kelvin, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Doctor, welcome and good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, Nancy. Good morning and good morning, Nigerians. Thank you.
Good morning, doctor. Let me start with doctor. Since he's a doctor, he's a doctor amongst us. Doctor, I don't think I've spoken to you since after the elections. We spoke before the elections. What do you think about what has happened so far? I don't want us to go into the process and all that. It doesn't concern us this morning. You know, we looked at that, the election situation room, and a lot of stations did that. But let's talk about those that have emerged. How much of an enormous challenge, or how much of a challenge do you think that these various governors-elect, as well as the re-elected governors, will be facing?
Of course, the first thing, as you said, we shouldn't talk about the processes that led to their emergence of, even though you don't want us to talk about it, but the first thing is to look at the kind of crisis of legitimation that most of them are having or will be having, in the sense that in many states, there are protests. Many people are believing that the election the election was not free and fair. So that would be the first challenge that most of the governors elected will be having, because of course you need that social capital, you need that trust, you need that acceptance, you need that legitimacy to be able to bring about good policies that your citizens will support you to achieve. So outside this, what I would call legitimation crisis or acceptance, there are a lot of so many issues that the governors will be facing. So I would list some of them. Of course, before the election, there was a report that we have over 430 something million Nigerians classified as being multidimensionally poor. So we have about 139 something million Nigerians that are multidimensionally poor. So that means that about, if you break it down, close to over 60 in the rural, over 40 in the urban. So that's a big issue that the governors will have to find out how they're going to start addressing, and they have to do it in different ways. It also, in many states in Nigeria, we have the current governors are not paying pensions, they are not paying salaries, they are not paying gratuities, and this will be inherited by the incoming governors. That's on one side. Also, the issue of insecurity, knowing fully well that we are largely poor population. And of course, when you now go to different states, if they cannot go to their farms due to insecurity, is an issue that the governors will look into as well. And of course, that means that agriculture becomes very, very important in terms of what kind of policies are they going to use to address some of these challenges in terms of seedlings, in terms of farm access, in terms of evacuation, in terms of so many things relating to agriculture. That takes us to the issue of unemployment that is very, very high across Nigeria. And so the governors will have to look into how will they create jobs creatively, and knowing fully well that the economy is dominated by micro and small scale enterprises. The question then is, how will the governors support these micro and small scale enterprises to upscale and be able to employ people and be able to add value to the economy of the different states. And also is that many of the states they are highly indebted. So as some of the governors, some of them are even still borrowing. So the question is, when the new governors come in, how will they be able to manage these debts that are increasing? And we're also hearing that the subsidy might be removed before May 29th. So before they come in, maybe let's use the price of diesel, which is currently about 700 something naira. Let's assume that fuel starts selling at 600 naira, 700 or 500. What will be the impact in the different states in terms of social challenges, economic challenges, and all that? And of course, we shouldn't forget that we live in a global economy where Nigeria is part. That means that what happens in the global environment, the global economy will affect Nigeria. And we now look into issues about the, the national budget in Nigeria, where we are planning to spend about 20 something trillion naira. We are going to borrow about 10 point something. Revenue is just about 9 point something. Debt service about 6.3. Recurrent expenditure 4.9. Capital expenditure 4.9. So the question then is, how would governors grapple with all this? So these are, I just listed some of the challenges that are going to be facing as they take over leadership in their different states. In addition to what I said earlier on, the issue of their legitimacy in terms of acceptance across the different states, which is very
Okay.
fundamental and key.
Okay, doctor, as the doctor you are, you've actually broken down this program for us in terms of the layers which we'll take a look at least within now and the next 40 minutes. So God help us. But since you brought me to the area of legitimacy, let me take a look at it from this angle, and let me stick with it just for a few seconds. Do you think that the question around the legitimacy of those governors-elect, perhaps for states that still have those legitimacy issues, do you think that in any way it will impact governance in that state? Do you think in any way it would impact their economy, bearing in mind, talking about FDI now, or how outsiders will be looking at those states and thereby impacting investments? Do you see anything like that? Because when you were talking, my mind actually went there. Very quickly, doctor, in 30 seconds before I come to Kelvin.
Yes, it will. And it will do, of course, when you talk about investment, you have to look at local investment and external investment. So the people of the state, the citizens of the state, will have to have confidence in the governance of the states before they will want to invest in their states. And of course, before a foreign investor will go in, he will definitely look for people who are from that state. So it will. So if you have a legitimation crisis, as we are having across different states, so it's one example. See what is going on in Nasarawa State, where the women are testing almost nude. And of course, if I want to buy something in Nasarawa State, I will have to hold on and say, before I buy this property, let me even see if the place will normalize a little bit. And of course, it's the same legislation crisis that we're having in Nigeria. So as it's happening nationally, so it's happening across the state. So it's a big issue. And of course, trust is very fundamental for economic growth and development. So it is very, very important.
Okay.
And it's something that we have to look into.
Okay. Kelvin, you've heard, Doctor. What are your views around the newly elected governors, and what challenges do you think that they have? Of course, Doctor has enumerated that, except you want to take a few of what he's spoken about before we go into the nitty-gritty of some of the states, and we'll show the cards on the screen in a short while.
So I listened to the governor-elect of Plateau State speaking to the media recently, and he mentioned the issue of security and agriculture, and he mentioned that only 20% of the revenues generated in Plateau State comes from industries. Like most of the revenues generated by the people comes from agriculture. Plateau is a major agricultural state. It has a problem with security. Nigeria has 1 policeman per 562 people. Yeah, the global average is 1 policeman per 155 persons. There has been the issue of state policing. And after the elections, Nigerians are saying, given what we've seen the governors do, no. But then you go back to the 5th alteration in the constitutional amendment, and you see what the president signed in the 16 bills. And you see checks and balances you need for state policing that must come before state policing, that the governors have fought, by the way, because it was the Nigerian Governors Forum that took the president to court when he signed Executive Order EO10. The issue of financial autonomy for state judiciary, financial autonomy for state legislature, for you to create state policing and ensure there is internal security that is key to guaranteeing investments and economic growth, you need checks and balances. Second important issue for me is debt profile of the state. Yeah. Cross River, for example, has an irrevocable standing payment order of over 600 million per month. Yes.
But is it not for almost all the states that have the ISPO?
Yes.
Because if they are owing, they take it from the source, from FAC, before
Yes.
the remainder gets to them.
Yes, and that is to say that you have low IGR to FAC ratio. Lagos has the highest at 76%, and it's because the IGR Lagos generates is equivalent to the IGR of 26 states put together. Yes, but you have other states that have IGR that is lower than 10 billion naira per year. You know, so you have a low IGR to FAC, and they have to rely on the debt capital markets to be able to raise state government bonds to fund their budgets. You know, and you know, Doctor raised the issue of debt. He broke down the fact that in 2023 Appropriation Act there is like a 12 trillion naira deficit, and in the budget the government has already said they're going to have to raise about 7.6 trillion naira to fund the budget. Now you can see how that has interplayed with CBN Ways and Means, and you can see how that has affected our exchange rates and how it has impacted exchange rate-induced inflation in Nigeria. So the next president needs to work with the Nigerian Governors Forum. He needs to work with the central bank. Monetary and fiscal policy has to go hand in hand. Yeah, you need to raise the revenue to GDP ratio, both for non-oil and oil, from 7.34% and 6.3%. You need to raise it up to at least 18 to 20% to rely less on debt as a means to fund your budget deficits. This is a question because, and if you look at the state government, the total state budget debt outline for 31 states plus FCT is about 5.3 trillion naira, which is about 13.7% of the total debt stock for the federating units. Now, the Nigerian Governors Forum need to work together, and they need to see how they can begin to focus on relying less on debt, because every state has its own comparative advantage, and raise IGR to make sure that they have a good fiscal profile. Okay.
Doctor, do you think that these new elected governors, that's the governors-elect, the crop of the governors-elect that we have right now, do you see this crop of people as being new, or do you think they will bring anything creative or innovative to the table? I would ask my team to put some of the cards on the screen. Let's take a look at even some of the re-elected people. Then we'll start from there. Since, no, the newly elected, because the governors that are re-elected, they've been there for 4 years, and we have the statistics of the 4 years. So let's take a look at the newly elected governors. Okay, guys, those are some of their pictures there. Umo Eno, that's for Akwa Ibom State. I know you have Francis Nwafuru of Ebonyi, and a few, Ubasani, Kaduna. We have the new person from the NNPP party in Kano, yes, and all of that. So Doctor, what do you think with these new guys? Will they bring that, will they rejig the system?
Of course, given the pictures that you just presented, we have some old ones coming back, like Zulum in Borno State. We have Dabo Abiodun in Ogun State. We have...
Doctor, I don't want us to talk about the old ones first. Let's talk about the new ones. We'll come back to the old ones.
So with the new ones,
yes,
it will be a bit too early to say whether they will do well or not do well. But I've gone through some of their manifestos.
Okay.
I will say that some of their manifestos are good. Some of them, they are still speaking a lot of English with a bit. It's still a bit too just theory that they want to get into government. So they have to now start thinking about how to implement some of the things that they've said in their manifesto. So it's going to be, but even if they are determined, even if they are committed to making changes, there are some certain things that we need to take into consideration. We are now in March, so first quarter is gone. So, and we are now, before they get sworn in, that will be around May 29. And that means that second quarter will almost be going. And with regards to the legitimation crisis I talked about, that is affecting the presidential election, so it depends on how that goes, which will now, of course, what happens at the national level will now affect the states. Before the state governors now settle down and get their cabinet, start going. But let me just mention something, just for us to bear in mind. In 2019, when the minimum wage was about 30,000 naira, as of today, the value of that 30,000 naira is less than maybe
It's about
about 50,
19,000.
less than 19,000
Mm-hmm.
going by. So as they are coming in, they are faced with litany of challenges. But of course, they've been elected to resolve or tackle challenges. So we expect them to be creative. We expect them to be innovative. We expect them to not to give us reasons why they should not perform. We don't expect them to come and tell us there are issues in the federal government that they will not perform. We expect them to even appreciate that we know that there are issues, but they are going to implement XYZ policies. And interestingly, as well, based on what the powers that they have, even if we look at the Constitution, at the concurrent list, in addition to the one that the president has just given to them again, like railway, like prison, like electricity generation, transmission, and distribution, there are lots of opportunities for them to do well, particularly the opportunity we have in Nigeria, agriculture, SME, technology, and all that. So they shouldn't have a reason not to succeed because the assets that we have across the states still outperform or a lot higher than the liabilities and challenges that they're having. So they should do well.
Mm. Okay, I like that optimistic note. They should do well. And just like you said, I also went through a few of their manifestos for some of the states and also listened to some of them when they were campaigning. Now, let's see if we can break down a few states, taking a look at the state's economic fat file, and we'll bring them up in just some seconds, guys. So let's do that. Now, let's start from even Abia State. And why I want us to talk about Abia is that Alex Oti was just been newly elected, has come up many times to say, okay, I heard him say he's going to do a ministry, he's going to establish a ministry of Aba, for example. I heard him also say that he would pay off, salaries, pensions, and all of that. And some people were saying, Mr. Man, hold on first. Stop making promises when you haven't seen the books. Yet. He has also gone on record to say, oh, I'm already even beginning, to talk to some of the lenders and all of that. What do you think? Bearing in mind, if we have that of Abia State, let's put Abia State on air. Let me quickly get Abia State. Abia State, the GDP is at, the GDP 3.53 trillion naira. Thank you, guys. That's it on the screen. The ease of doing business, 32. Let me check the latest one and see where they are. The latest that was released yesterday and see where Abia is he on the 32. Okay, so in this year it actually improved from 33 to 21st position. Okay, so domestic debt you have about 95 billion, foreign debts, that's it on the screen. I don't need to go through it again. Inflation 22.6%. What do you think in the context of what I've asked, Kelvin?
First of all, I think states needs to focus on their comparative advantage. And given Abia has, number one, an issue of there's so much reliance on public sector recruitment that has affected the accumulation of pension. Now, I'm not giving excuses for the outgoing governor, like, months and months of debts that has not been paid in terms of sometimes salaries and then gratuities for the workers. But he needs to focus on industry and trade. And for him to do that, he needs to focus on infrastructure. He needs to focus on human capacity building. He needs to focus on access to credit. This is very, very key. Alex Oti was Group Managing Director of former Diamond Bank, and he brings to bear that private sector experience because he was instrumental to the growth of the bank. So he needs to deploy his skills and his antecedents to help to see how he can unlock credit for micro and small businesses in Abia, so that, because without access to infrastructure, electricity, without access to credit, he can't unlock the potential that Abia has. And talking about Abia, it brings me to the point that Abia and Aba as a commercial nerve center needs access to a seaport. Okay? Onne Seaport is designated as EMP. What is the closest? Calabar Seaport. What is the other closest? Ibaka Deep Seaport that is not existing, that is on the paper, yeah, and that will take another 4 or 5 years at least to get on board. Calabar Seaport, for example, the Cross River State Governor is coming in, is new, Prince Basio too. He has a challenge of working with the MPA to raise the channel draft, see how they can possibly change terminal operators to call Panamax ships. He needs to invest in new infrastructure to ease shore to crane, logistics around the seaport, so that more people around the southeast and the north central can use that seaport, because that seaport is actually critical to the success of trade in Abia. The thing we've had where people go through Apapa and Tinkan to be able to get their goods all the way, and all the associated cost of trucking their goods all the way from Lagos to Aba and back, and the cost of diesel and the bad state of the roads we have,
yeah,
it's a problem for trade.
Okay, so how much sense does it really make when I heard Oti say, I'm going to establish a ministry of Aba? Isn't it a failure of a system of a ministry of perhaps trade and commerce? Yeah. Is it trade and commerce? Yes, with even a ministry of, what's this ministry called? Works, for example, in the state, that will have a commissioner that will do the roads and all that. Why establishing a ministry of Aba? What came to my mind when I heard that is Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, because of the load shedding issues in South Africa and the electricity problems, I'm having a minister of electricity. And I'm wondering, just like even the opposition in South Africa told him, if you are having a failure of an existing system, you create another bureaucracy for the failure of it to fix. So I don't know what your view is about that.
Well, I don't want to say he's playing to the gallery and trying to impress people, or, because there's so much high hope and expectation for him, given what the history they've had, and like someone said, he should wait and see the books before he makes promises. Alex Oti needs to take advantage of bill number 32, I think, in the just signed 16 bills that talks about moving electricity from exclusive to concurrent. And the states cannot do it in silos. They have to work as a Nigerian Governors Forum. Even for railway. For example, if you notice that in Nigeria you have vertical train infrastructure, rail infrastructure, but you don't have horizontal rail infrastructure. Yeah, railway is cheaper to move cargo. The wear and tear of so much pressure of trucks on the road also impacts the shelf life of roads. If you speak with the Ministry of Works, they will tell you about this. Okay, so you need horizontal rail infrastructure from the southeast to the south-south to the southwest, right? So these are not things that he can address in silos. He needs electricity in Abia State, in Aba, because electricity is very fundamental and key to any production you want to do, right? And going by the fact that Ipman has said that by June 1, if Dangote refinery does not come, and the federal government goes ahead to see how they can remove 7.2 trillion naira from their balance sheet for paying on the recovery on PMS subsidy, the price of a liter of PMS, according to the sub-Saharan average of $1.20 per liter, is going to go above 750 naira per liter. You can imagine what the cost of doing business would be for people who have to rely on their small generator to be able to generate their own electricity. So these are issues that he has to address, but they need to address it as a Nigerian Governors Forum.
Okay, so that's a new perspective you're bringing in, and not for these governors to look at these issues as silos. Now let's come to you, Doctor. Doctor, which other state is interesting? to you. We've talked about Abia State. Which other state looks interesting to you amongst those that are going to be coming in? I know you are from Enugu State. I don't want to talk about the ease of doing business number 26th. The GDP 1.45 trillion naira, according to MBS. Poverty rate 2019 about 58.13%. But let me leave it to you. Really, is there any other state that is of interest to you? Should we still stick with the south as east, just like we started with Aba? That's Abia in Abia State.
I think that every state is of interest to us. And I believe that every state has all the potentials to do very, very well. But I mean, I can talk around. So, for instance, Abia State, Alex Oti can be considered as one of the, would I say, fortunate governors because he's going to govern Abia State. In the sense that Abia already has a lot of assets that needs to be properly squeezed to achieve what he wants to achieve. Kevin talked about power, for instance. Remember that Geometric is already in Aba, and they have the license to generate, transmit, and distribute. And I think that they're covering about, I think about 6 local governments or 7 local governments in Abia State. And interestingly, you have Aba. So I wouldn't support the idea of creating Ministry of Aba. So that is unnecessary bureaucracy and rest of them. So if Alex Oti wants to quickly do something, if you want to set up an agency, it can be a Aba Development Authority, and he should be the CEO so that it will give it the necessary attention, seriousness, and urgency it requires. Aba is also as well as an industrial hub. So all he needs is to look at the challenges that are facing infrastructure, electricity already provided, and all that is, and give it all the necessary attention it requires. Aba alone can pay off all the that the Abia is owing. It can also generate enormous revenue that will turn the state to truly God's own state. So it doesn't have any reason to fail. And luckily as well, is going into as a Labour Party candidate and a Labour Party governor. Remember also that one of the key messages of P2B is to move emphasis from consumption to production. So we believe and think that he should actually use that message and start implementing it to move Abia State from consumption to production. And if he does it, as Kevin mentioned as well, there are seaports very close to him, rivers, Calabar, and all that. And he should collaborate with other states in the water zones to be able to have access to the sea. And then look at Abia as a hub for industrial development and supply for South-South and Southeast states. So that takes me to Enugu State. So in Enugu State, we had a governor who for 8 years seems a bit confused in terms of
Okay.
do in terms of, and that's why I have these challenges. So in terms of, there are a lot of opportunities are still abound in Enugu in terms of what to do with regards to, can you still hear me?
Yes, doctor, we can hear you.
Okay, so you see that the GDP is 1.45, ease of doing business 26th, domestic debt, I mean, you can see it on the, so the governor-elect, Peter Mba, also is very, will I say, in a very good position to go with Nigeria, is Central State. So it's already a state that is already there. All that is required is now, how do you look at the comparative advantage and the assets you have in Enugu State to turn it around? A few days ago, former President Olusegun Obasanjo was in Anambra State during the first year anniversary of Governor Soludo. And he mentioned something that he said, make Anambra a palm product in Nigeria. Interestingly, Enugu and other states in Southeast, they have a comparative advantage in terms of palm. So if, for instance, that Peter Mba decides and say, in my first year, I'm going to make sure that we have 5 million economic trees in Enugu State, it means that in the next 3 years, Enugu State will be generating close to over 100 billion just from economic trees. So that is how it is in Benue with Father Alia. That is how it is in Plateau with the new governor with Potato and other. So all the governors, they can do a lot across the different states.
It's interesting you talk about Benue because I was almost coming to Benue. But let me come to you, Kelvin. What other states really is of interest to you? Seeing the crops of people that will come. We've talked about Abia. We've talked about Dr. did raise Benue earlier on, who happens to be a reverend father that would that will come in. A lot of eyes will be on Benue. Now it's like God will be in charge of Benue State, and let's see, let's see what happens this time around. But what are other states? Yesterday I spoke with my guest, and we spoke about Lagos, we spoke about Oguano, and some other states. But what states interest you, Kelvin? Let's take it from.
Taraba is interesting for me. Taraba is interesting for me because of the Mambila district in Taraba State.
Taraba has a poverty rate of about 87%.
Yes, and that's because they've not been very fortunate with leadership in Taraba State. I'll give you an example. 33% of Kenya's GDP came from tea.
Tea, yes.
Last year, Kenya generated $1 billion in export revenue from tea.
Just from tea, not even flowers,
Just
not
tea.
horticulture.
Just tea.
Yes.
Now, the Mambila district has potential, the Kakara Tea Estate. It has potential for tea, it has potential for tourism. And this brings me back to my issue of security in the Northeast, because you cannot grow. A lot of the reason why there is a shortage in the output for rice, paddy, maize, sorghum, and the rest of them, soya bean, is because of the issue of security. Yeah? You need to increase policing. You need to increase the focus on education, so you don't, graze people who are going to be lured into, banditry and all of that. But if you look at the economic potential that Taraba has with tea and tourism, you begin to see that if the incoming governor decides to focus on their comparative advantage and increase the amount of bulk tea that they produce and sell to the companies in Nigeria, 28 companies that imports bulk tea, when you have Taraba, they will raise the amount of IGRA they have and also raise the per capita income of the people, okay? If you look at Plateau and Benue State, Plateau has a huge potential with agriculture. Benue, for example, is called the food basket of Nigeria. And this is the reason why I believe it's important for the states, for example, to consider the idea of setting up state investment corporations.
So some of them have?
As a PPP, not to be managed by the state. Because you go back to River State. In 2021, I think, Shell built like an industrial starch plant and handed it over to the state government. The reports I got last year is that that place is literally not functioning. Shell built a state-of-the-art industrial starch plant. Nigeria as a country, as a CSRO, by the way, as a corporate social responsibility, Nigeria as a country spends $600 million importing starch every year for production. Yeah? And you have only 13% of that demand.
You produce a lot of cassava.
Yes.
That goes to waste.
That goes to waste. Starch comes from cassava, it comes from rice, it comes from maize, it also comes from potatoes.
Yes, it comes from carbohydrates. All carbohydrates have starch.
So the question is, if you set up state investment corporations like SPVs and have a core investor sale, bring in a company with a track record to buy 51% of the shares and operate it, and pay dividends to the state.
Like
you
generate
IGR. You generate IGR. Benue State has a huge potential because it has a lot of these crops. And it can basically like partner with the private sector through a PPP, set up a PPP act by the State House of Assembly, and get core investors to invest in the states and take advantage of the agricultural output that they have.
So you're talking about Plateau State. You talk about Plateau State. Okay, that's Benue State. Let's also have Plateau State on poverty rate about 55%, and one would wonder how much poverty we're seeing in these states that have comparative advantage, that are blessed with agricultural produce that other countries just sell and they make billions of dollars.
The problem is, I'll tell you what I think the problem is. You have a federal structure where governors send commissioners of finance and accountant general every month end to Abuja to sit down with FAC
And
yeah,
share the money.
and share the money. You need to change the principles that establishes the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Allocation Commission. There are 5 principles. You have population, which is the reason NPC is coming up with census in May. You have land mass, you have equity of states, you have IGR, and then you have derivation. You need to change it to 2. Derivation and IGR. Let everybody go and answer his father's name. They'll wake up. This idea that you need FAC and you need to create an equal basket for FAC, for states to get allocation at the end of the month, it's not help Nigeria.
Kelvin, do you think, and let me come to Doctor now, taking it from where you stop. Doctor, do you think that the supposed lazy attitude that we've seen among governors, or perhaps majority of governors, around internally generating sources of revenue, around being creative, being innovative, thinking outside of the box, so to speak, is due to the reason Kelvin has alluded to? Or perhaps also because of the way governance, because of the way our public system is created, in the sense that the winner takes all, and there's so much emolument, there's so much reward, for instance, to be a governor. Anyone now that these newly elected governors will be looking forward to, what's my security vote at the end of the day? Every month, nobody needs to ask me. That one can be going into private pocket, for example. Even the House of Rep members, even the State Assembly members, there's so much reward. So doesn't it just make people lazy? And once I just get for myself, the states can go to wherever they want to go to. Do you think that's also a factor?
I think it's a combination of different factors. In addition to what Kevin said, of course, even as individuals, imagine, Nancy, now that every month, at the end of the month, you just receive an alert of 10 billion naira. You don't know where the money is coming from.
I won't
the money
work again, Doctor.
Of course, you will not work again. And as the money is being, all you need to do is to tell the Commission for Finance, transfer this here, do this, do this, do this.
And get dividends yes, for keeping the money. Or get interest, yes.
Yes. And of course, you mentioned something about security votes. You want to increase security votes. Yes, we shoot gun in the night in different places in your state. And you say there's a justification to increase security votes. And you increase security. And it's not accountable. So you remember in our previous discussions, I've raised the fact that the governors should see themselves as CEOs of different states. And if you are appointed as a CEO, of course, the shareholders expect you and other stakeholders expect you to bring return on investment. If you don't pay dividends, the shareholders will sell their shares and move on. Other stakeholders will start fighting you. So it is important that we tell our governors that they are like CEOs and they should put on their thinking caps. I've said earlier on that governors should not be allowed to go to Senate or to go to anywhere. Once you are a governor, you're a governor, you know you're a governor. Not when they come, their mind will not even be focused on governing the states, but their mind will be focused on how to become president or how to retire in the Senate, as the case may be. And that's why many of them are not performing. So I think that the structure of governance that we have in Nigeria, the cheap money that they get from Abuja, it makes them to a bit. I remember somebody was telling me that the governor was landing. Anytime he travels and is landing, all commissioners, traditional rulers, they will be at the airport waiting for him. And one day he was coming back and he looked at his friend and he said, there is nothing like power. So, of course, imagine a situation where everybody will leave what they are doing to come and receive the governor because he's landing. So all the productive hours will be wasted. So if we change this narrative that you're going to be receiving money every month, they will think. And as I keep emphasizing, there is no state in Nigeria that is not viable. There is no state in Nigeria that cannot say we don't want to depend on Abuja after 3 years if they do what they're supposed to do. Remember that we mentioned about.
Doctor, are you still there?
Multidimensional. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now, Doctor. Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Doctor, we can hear you.
Okay, so I was talking about the multidimensional poverty in Nigeria. where we have about 130 something million Nigerians classified as multidimensionally poor. And it relates to health and education. So it means, for instance, in our different states, our educational standard has gone down significantly. And when you find out, you look at the budgetary allocation for education, and these things can easily be tackled. All I'm trying to say is that any governor that is interested, innovative, and committed to turn his state around can easily do that. Kevin mentioned that Kenya made about $1 billion from
See.
last year. I was in Rwanda in 2022, and we drove 6 hours from Kigali. And that 6 hours, all we were seeing were just plantations everywhere. Just you mentioned about tea as well. They are doing very, very well in tea. As if you cultivate tea in high mountains, the taste is a lot better. And what they've also done is that at the valley of the hills, they're also cultivating rice, all kinds of things. And what they've also done is that they've created dams across Rwanda. And of course, dams I'm talking about is dams that you can do with about $20,000, $10,000, as the case may be. So if a governor in Nigeria wants to do all year round agriculture, it's possible and it's not expensive. Last year, we had flooding across Nigeria that killed so many people. This can be corrected by building dams in different parts of Nigeria that all the water will percolate and they can use it for agriculture.
Okay,
So
doctor.
any government that does not do well, Nigeria should hold the person accountable.
Okay, doctor, we have about 3 minutes to go. Let me come back to Kelvin. Do you think that the old governors that are now being elected, do you think they are going to show these new governors good examples? Are they really good examples? Talking about re-elected governors like Babajide Sanwo-Olu, Oyo State, Makinde, we have his Ogun State counterpart, Governor Abiodun, and all of that. So for these old governors that have just been re-elected, are they going to show us good examples, bearing in mind what we're actually seeing, their economic fact file? Because I'm looking at the economics of their states, it's not really about the politics. The politics is a different ballgame. But what do you think?
People say Sanwo-Olu has done well. I don't share that sentiment because Lagos is the smallest state in Nigeria with 30,577 square kilometers. It has the highest IGR to FAC ratio. Lagos generated about 548 billion naira.
Lagos has the highest debt too.
Last year, it has the highest debt also. Yeah. Lagos has issue with urban planning. Horrible urban planning.
But Lagos has, I think, the lowest poverty rate too.
It does.
4.5%.
It does because you have most of these companies, bank headquarters, you have the highest number of base stations. 15% of all base stations in Nigeria is in Lagos. You have four seaports. You have, the fourth one, Badagry is coming. They just started planning. So companies are compelled to be in Lagos and pay their taxes in Lagos. Okay, Lagos has an issue with horrible traffic. The life expectancy in Lagos is about 46 years. It's very low because of horrible traffic.
Compared to the national average.
Compared to the national average. Sanwo-Olu has an issue also with security, internal security, because you have a high ratio of unemployed and uneducated people. So for me, I don't think he's shown any good example, considering that he has revenues IGR equal to the IGR of 26 Nigerian states combined. I don't think he has shown good example, and I don't think the new governors have anything to learn from him, because for example, I'll tell you, and even if El-Rufai is a contentious topic in Nigeria today, El-Rufai has done very well in terms of raising the IGR profile of Kaduna State. And I dare say that if El-Rufai had the resources that Sanwo-Olu had, Kaduna would be so much more better and different than what it is today. I do not share the sentiment. Ogun State, for example, Ogun State has the potential to take a lot of business away from Lagos. Set up an industrial city, yeah? But, you know, the reality on the ground so far is not close to what we expect.
I think we'll continue the discussion on another day, because you're talking about Kaduna State. I quickly went to look. Ease of doing business in Kaduna is number 13. Of course, it's more than Lagos. Lagos even declined as at 2023's ease of doing business report, that it fell from 28 20th position to 29. But I'll be having Dr. Jumoke Oduwole, the special advisor to the president, on the ease of doing business tomorrow to shed light on all the states and the latest rankings and why perhaps some of the states have fallen behind and why we've seen some states improve. And what does exactly the ease of doing business mean in the Nigerian context for Gombe, for example, taking number 1, yet Gombe has a very high poverty rate. Thank you very much, Kelvin,
Thanks
for joining us.
Yes.
Doctor, thank you very much. That's the much we can take. Is Doctor still there? Dr. Franklin.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Thank you.
Dr. Franklin Ungu is the Director of Public Sector Initiative at the Lagos Business School, while Kelvin Emmanuel is the Chief Executive Officer at Dairy Hills Limited. We've been beaming our searchlight on these states. The conversation will still continue, at least ahead of May 29. Let's see, and we'll continue to monitor them closely. Thank you all for your great company. As always, please make a date with us again tomorrow. Be the best you can be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Bye now.